Welcome back to the big story. We do apologize for that audio hitch a few minutes ago. A quick recap of our big story tonight. The size of the next 4 successive parliaments will not be definite and it will only become clear a few days after the declaration of results of the general election. Now, this is if the 2/3 gender bill, commonly referred to as the Duale bill, is passed and President Uhuru Kenyatta signs it into law. That bill has a tenure of 20 years and will take effect after the 2022 general election, when men or women, or if men at all, will be nominated to special seats created by the bill in order to attain a gender balance in both the Senate and the National Assembly. This is the 4th attempt at Parliament in actualizing the Article 81B of the 2010 Constitution. In studio for this conversation, Esther Waweru, who is a legal advisor at Equality Now. We also have Kibe Mugai, who is a senior counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on the big story tonight. Esther, let me begin with you. 4 attempts later at making this legislation by Parliament, 8 years since the 2010 Constitution. Are we finally on the right track in achieving the 2/3 gender rule?
Thank you very much, Michelle. I think for me the starting point is it's been 8 years since we passed the Constitution. The provisions of Article 27, Sub-Article 8 are very clear in terms of ensuring that not more than two-thirds of either gender forms the membership of any elective or appointive position. And 8 years later, we haven't realized this, either in our legislative positions or appointive positions. And for me, this is a cause of concern. It speaks to whether we are serious as a country, as government, about really making sure that women and all genders, both genders, are actually participating in public affairs.
But we, for the first time, have the most number of legislators showing support for the 2/3 gender bill, especially this particular bill, considering that the 3 other attempts had quorum issues. So in light of that, would you say we're on the right track in at least enacting this legislation?
I think for as long as we have this conversation on the table, as long as we have not forgotten this discussion, then we are on the right track or on the way to realizing this. However, I can't quite say that we already have the numbers. Until the bill is put to a vote, we cannot say that we have the requisite 233 members supporting this. So until it's put to a vote, that's only when we'll know that we actually have a legislative process in place that would then ensure we realize this principle.
All right, and the numbers don't lie. Kibe, let me get your thoughts on this. You, first of all, have been very vocal on this issue. You are of the stand that the 2/3 gender rule is a big mistake for the country. Talk to us about this.
It's a big mistake. I maintain that position, and it's a position I'm willing to take even if I'll have to do it alone for 3 reasons. Number 1, Kenya is a democracy. I expect that Kenya would be a serious democracy. I have not seen a single nominated member in the US Congress or in the parliament of any serious country. So this experimentation with democracy in countries such as Kenya, that you can only be full if you have nominated people in parliament, that dilutes democracy. Because I believe if you are to make laws for us, you must have a mandate of a specific group of people that you're convinced you are a better representative than your competitor. Therefore, it fails the democratic test. Number 2 is that, in principle, the idea, I've got no difficulty. In principle, we can have more women in parliament. That's not a big deal. And you can even have 1/3. But where do you get this 1/3? The idea that you get them nominated is an idea that I don't agree with. I think you can be able to reconcile democracy with having more women. And you can be able to get that by ensuring you don't expand the current size of parliament. You use the legislative mechanism. And by legislative mechanism, it does not mean constitutional amendment. It means, for example, that political parties, you require them that in every county, they must ensure that they nominate 1/3 of their nominees during elections from either gender. Number 2, we fund political parties. The taxpayers fund political parties. If you are to say that 25% of the political funds from taxpayers will be allocated on the basis of how many women you have, I believe you can be able to achieve the two-thirds gender principle without doing violence to the democracy and without expanding the size of parliament. The issue number 3, the fundamental one, is that Kenya is a poor country. And Article 27 of the Constitution deals with many disadvantaged groups. But unfortunately, elitist women have been able to hijack Article 27 to mean that an article that was essentially made to ensure that poor families, street children, handicapped people would be seriously taken care of by the state, we only seem to be lamenting every day. Like the only serious problem in Kenya that we should use a lot of money on is actually to get more elite women into parliament on the basis of nomination.
Right.
And as Honorable Duale accepted, and I commend him for that, who are these at the end of the day? Who gets these positions? These are relatives, these are girlfriends, these are people associated in one way or the other with cronies. I think that if you really want, because the two-thirds gender principle, it does not just apply to parliament. It's supposed to be something that applies across the board. I would like to look at women as ordinary women that I meet every day. And one of the proposals, for example, that I make, let us even just take the police force. If today you are to say that let us have the gender principle applying to determine the number of OCPDs and OCSs, I believe you would achieve more for ordinary Kenyan women together with their civil service than you can probably achieve by just saying that you are empowering a few men. Let us remember, this last point, let us remember, there is no woman in Kenya who owns a single serious political party. So that at the end of the day, a bill that is made in the name of women ultimately will, in the current political scenario, will strengthen 6 men. They would be able to interfere with our democracy by ensuring that they can have all kinds of cronies into parliament.
Right.
This to me is not progress.
Right.
This is retrogression. And for that reason, I do not support that bill.
All right, several issues of concern there raised. Esther, let's perhaps discuss some of them. I just add on to that. Some of them, some of those who are against this bill say the bill does not in any way address issues that hinder women from thrusting themselves into elective leadership. Do you agree with that?
I think we must start from a point of realizing that there are certain inhibitions towards that hinder women from, participating fully in political processes. And it's not lost to us that we still exist in a highly patriarchal society. Women are not able to effectively participate on an equal basis or an equal platform as men in a lot of spheres in life, So we must first begin by accepting that factual truth, that we must deconstruct and end patriarchy in order to be able to allow women and enable them to participate in these spaces on an equal footing. But secondly, we must also realize that there are certain structural, legislative, as well as societal inhibitions that really must be addressed. For instance, as a society, we must begin to ask, why is it I cannot go on voting day and elect a woman? What is it that stops me from voting for a woman? Why do we view women as being lesser members of society? And, really to recall the words of President Barack Obama when he was here in 2015, for as long as we are playing with half of the members of the team outside the pitch, we are really, making no sense, and it's a stupid affair. We must ensure that we do not treat women as second-class citizens,
right.
But as key players in this political game who actually bring something to the table because they've got their own ideas, they've got leadership skills, they are well merited to take such positions and to deliver on them.
And there's also a bigger concern over how much impact this bill, should it sail through, will have on the space of women in elective politics. I mean, part of the core issues in this bill is that after the general elections, Kenyans will not immediately know the number of members of parliament they have. After the tallying, then the deficit of women will be dominated by political parties, dependent on their strength in parliament. But these same political parties mandated with carrying out these nominations famous for lacking democracy. So again, won't this bring us back to square one after enaction of this legislation?
I think we must begin to examine our political parties. As we know them, political parties exist as entities that are driven by an individual rather than as institutions. So we must begin to reform the democratic space within our political parties, how we govern our political parties, and ensure that we actually have laws, policies, regulations, and administrative measures that ensure that we are running our political parties as proper institutions that are accountable to the membership, but also to the country as a whole. It is only when we get our political parties governance proper that we'll be able to then say that when it comes to nominations within the political party lists, that we are actually nominating members, be they male or female, on account of merit, on a criteria that is well set outside of nepotism or other factors coming into play, but basically on the basis of party norms, party constitutions, but also on a criteria that's based on merit.
Right. And I want to take you back to a previous concern you have. I mean, you say it begins with society. We need to ask ourselves, why am I not voting for a woman? Why can I not vote for a woman? In 2016, in November, a quorum hitch at the National Assembly derailed a bill by the then chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, Samuel Chepkonga. This same bill sought to have progressive implementation for the gender principle, but women members of parliament protested against this bill. Again, and this, in terms of perception, made it look, very bad for women to protest against a bill meant to aid them in elective politics. How can you explain that?
I lost that last bit, but just to make a quick comment on the question of progressive realization and just the instrument and the process that we are adopting. For me, where I sit, political participation, that is a political right. Women participating within decision-making and political spaces is a right that is immediately realizable. It is not a social, economic right that is progressively realized. And so therefore, it is quite delusionary of us to think of political rights as being progressively realized. Yeah?
All right. All right, go ahead.
So starting from that point, I think there is reason for people to disallow a certain process to proceed if that is not the proper way that is going to get us to actually effectively implementing the two-thirds gender principle.
All right. Kibe, let me get your thoughts on this, because in March 2017, a High Court order by Judge John Mativo said that if the gender principle had not been implemented by June of 2017, that is last year, anyone could write to the Chief Justice to advise the President to dissolve Parliament. It was a conversation we saw flaring up in the country a few months ago. Should this bill not sail through, what does that mean for Kenya's Parliament?
I think it means nothing. There are certain provisions of the constitutions that were written that are not capable of implementation, like the provision that requires that, first of all, the president does not have the power to dissolve parliament. The tenure of parliament is guaranteed by the constitution.
Right.
So that when you have a schedule to the constitution, pretending that it is possible for the Chief Justice to advise the President to do what the President does not have power to do is one of those things that you say, as we were making the Constitution in a hurry, we simply got it wrong.
Right.
There is nothing that can happen, whether or not you don't pass this bill. Number two is that what the Supreme Court said in 2012 and what Judge Mativo said in 2017 is that the necessary legislation to be passed, a constitutional amendment, I repeat, a constitutional amendment is not legislation.
Right.
Actually, Article 260 of the Constitution defines what is a legislation. It is a normal law passed by Parliament, which in this case, the laws relevant to the issue would be the Elections Act or the Political Parties Act. You use those mechanisms to ensure that you achieve the two-thirds gender principle. So that one of the technical objections that I have to what is happening right now is that the amendment that is before the Constitution is technically wrong. Nobody required anybody to amend the Constitution. You are simply required to bring the relevant legislations to add the number of elected women in Parliament.
Right,
why is it so difficult
and let me
to
just
do
make
that?
it clearer there, because the legislations here we're talking about is the Political Parties Act and the Elections Act of 2011. And in your article, I'm taking a look at an article that you read here, you said that pursuant to Articles 27 and 81B of the Constitution, nothing whatsoever prevented government lawyers from amending these two laws to realize the two-thirds gender principle. What then do you think could have been the problem there?
No, you see what they are doing? They are amending the Constitution. The Constitution, you are not supposed to increase the size of Parliament. You are supposed to maintain the same size of Parliament and then amend the Elections Act and the Political Parties Act to ensure, for example, that the Political Parties Act in doing nominations, you restrict the right so that, for example, in a county you can say, if you have 6 nominees, 2 of them must be women. For example, if you are to apply that in Kiambu, it would mean, because I don't see you could have had anything other than Jubilee, right, you would have had quite a number of women coming under Jubilee. The same case would happen in Luo Nyanza and in the North Rift, where William Ruto comes from. And therefore, the truth of the matter is, even if you share even the political parties' funds on the basis of promoting the size of women, the number of women in Parliament, these two-thirds gender principle would be achieved. But for some reason, instead of retaining the current size of Parliament prescribed by the constitutions, people want to add additional seats. Right. And that is an unnecessary burden to ordinary people.
All right, Esther, just borrowing from that, should the bill sail through, then additional seats will be created, to allocate for the two-thirds gender rule. But what that means that the country will have to pay about 60 million shillings more monthly for salaries and allowances of these nominated women members of Parliament. This is at a time when we're dealing with a soaring wage bill. There are those who think it's just not the right time. But is a soaring wage bill enough reason to scuttle efforts at achieving the two-thirds gender rule?
Absolutely not. I do not believe that the increase in the wage bill is a reason to shoot down any measures towards ensuring that we achieve the not more than two-thirds gender principle. I think that is an excuse. It's diversionary and should not be entertained. If you look at the amount of money that is wasted, public funds that are wasted, through unmerited public expenditure, you cannot equate it to the 60 million per year or the 10 shillings and 50 cents that every Kenyan will have to bear in order to achieve the two-thirds gender principle. So I totally do not believe that that is a reason that is merited to shoot down this bill.
Well, at the end of the day, even as we get your final comments on this, does this bill meet the constitutional provisions for attainment of gender parity on a sustainable basis?
For me, I don't think it conclusively and comprehensively deals with all the aspects that we'll be looking at. And that is why, for me, I don't just stick on the legislative measures, because Article 27.8 says legislative and other measures. So why are we not looking at those other measures? And let's not just be fixated on the elective positions. Let's remember the appointive positions. For instance, Cabinet hasn't met that threshold. The President is on record this week just calling on Parliament to pass this bill. But has he himself implemented that two-thirds gender rule? Does he believe in it? If he does, then we should see it through his actions, through his appointive actions, and not just by word of calling Parliament to enact that law. Right. But also, just in conclusion, is to say that let's also address the other issues that I talked about. For instance, let's make it safe. Let's create an enabling environment for women to be able to participate in political affairs and in public affairs. And we can do this by, for instance, dealing with the inhibitions that I mentioned earlier on, but also recognizing that it's within the political space with the campaign period that women suffer sexual and gender-based violence, which is something that really makes women to shy away from the political space. Let's address those issues first.
All right. Kibe, whether the bill sails through or not, after President Uhuru Kenyatta signs it, you've taken the stand that it is a big mistake for the country. In light of that, what else can the country do? What solutions do we have to implement the two-thirds gender rule?
I think for me, if the bill fails, and I hope it fails, it will enable Parliament to go and do the right thing from a technical point of view, to pass the necessary legislation that does not lead to an increment in the size of Parliament. Number two, when, for example, President Barack Obama talked about playing with half a team, the other team not playing, I thought he meant women engaging in productive activity. Right. It is only in Kenya that people assume politics is a productive activity. I don't think it's a productive activity. It is a cost. And the cost, even when you just calculate the salary of an MP, the cost of having every other additional MPs goes far beyond the issue of, it goes beyond the issue of salary. Because, for example, this is a poor country in which few women who are capable, you are removing them from the productive sectors of the economy and of our society in order to come and make the same noise that is being made by 290 people. Right. We don't need more noise. If noise must be made, let it be restricted to 290. Finally, all the MPs that I know, they actually keep saying that majority of the people who voted for me, these are men, are actually women. And I am not aware of a single issue in which a woman would be a better representative than I am. Because the people having decided that it's going to be a man, and so many men actually decide that we are going to have a women MP, including a woman governor. Kenyans are actually liberal. Today, when the results of KCP were being read, I actually saw there were more female candidates than male. And therefore, Kenyans, we do not have a gender problem. In fact, women should be commended if you have few of them in politics. This is not a productive activity, but if you must have more, it should be within 290. That is my view.
All right, many thanks. Senior Counsel Kibe Mungai, also in studio. He is a legal advisor, anti-equality, now discussing implementation of the two-thirds gender rule 8 years after envisaged by the drafters of the 2010 Constitution. That is the big story tonight. My name is Michelle Ngele Obiambo. Good evening.